She laughed at the homeless man and said, "Fly this jet, and I'll marry you." But when the engines roared and the truth hit the sky, her smile vanished, because the man she mocked wasn't who she thought he was, and his past could destroy them both. Hello, my amazing family and friends. I'm so glad you're here with me again today. If you're ready to dive into another powerful story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me the country or city you're watching from. And guess what? Tomorrow, I've got another story lined up that will leave you just as captivated, so don't miss it. Now, let's get started. The night air over Savannah, Georgia, shimmered faintly against the glow of runway lights. Inside the glass-walled terminal of a private airfield, champagne glasses clinked, laughter swirled, and luxury dripped from every corner. It was a charity gala for elite pilots, men and women who commanded the skies for sport and spectacle, not survival. Among them, Vivian Prescott moved like she owned the air itself. She was 28, beautiful in a sculpted, intimidating way, her blonde hair tied in a sharp twist that made her cheekbones look like carved marble. Daughter of an aviation mogul, she'd been flying private jets since her early 20s, her name printed on glossy aviation magazines as the Sky Heiress. She didn't notice the coldness in her laugh anymore, or how the people around her mirrored it only to stay close to her father's empire. "Viv, the press loves you," her friend Janelle murmured, holding out a glass of rose. "They're calling you the face of female aviation again." Vivian smirked. "They should. I didn't inherit skill. I earned it." But behind her words, something ached. Because no matter how many accolades she collected, her father's words echoed in the hollow between her ribs. "You'll never be half the pilot your mother was." Outside the hangar, the world was quieter. There, sitting by a dumpster behind the catering trucks, Caleb Turner rubbed his hands together for warmth. His coat was too thin for the chill, his face lined with weariness that no age could measure. At 36, he had the posture of a man who used to stand tall, but now bent to survive. He had once been a pilot too, Air Force trained, decorated, promising. Until a tragedy, the kind that rips a life apart, left him grounded in more ways than one. Now, he swept hangar floors for minimum wage and slept wherever security wouldn't find him. But tonight was different. Tonight, fate placed him in proximity to the world he once ruled. The gleaming hangar filled with laughter, the scent of jet fuel that always stirred his soul. As Caleb pushed his cleaning cart inside, trying not to draw attention, Vivian's group burst into laughter near one of the display jets. "This old beauty still flies," one man said, patting the nose of a restored Gulfstream. Vivian tilted her head, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Only if someone worthy can fly it. My fiancé couldn't even taxi straight last time." The group roared with laughter. Caleb froze mid-step, eyes fixed on the aircraft. He recognized the tail number instantly, N702CT. That was his plane, the same one he'd flown on his last mission before everything went wrong. The memory hit him like a storm. The flashing red lights, the shaking controls, the screams in his headset. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to breathe. But fate, it seemed, wasn't done humiliating him. "Hey," Vivian's voice cut through the noise. "You there, what are you staring at?" Caleb blinked, realizing too late that her icy blue eyes were on him. "Sorry, ma'am. Just cleaning up." The other snickered. "He looks like he's never even been inside a jet." Vivian smirked, stepping closer. "You ever flown before?" A flicker of something unreadable passed through Caleb's eyes. "Yeah, once or twice." Her laughter was sharp. "Once or twice." "What paper planes?" The group chuckled again, but Caleb's silence unsettled her. His calmness wasn't defensive, it was almost dignified. That only made her push harder. She picked up a pilot's cap from a table, twirling it on her finger. "Tell you what," she said, eyes glinting with cruel playfulness. "Fly this jet, and I'll marry you." The laughter that followed was a wave of derision. But Caleb didn't laugh. He simply looked at her, then at the jet, his jaw tightening. Slowly, he reached out, caught the cap mid-air as she tossed it, and placed it on his head. Vivian's smirk faltered, because in that instant, just a second, his posture changed. Straightened, controlled, commanding, like a man who'd spent a lifetime in the sky. The laughter died down awkwardly. Caleb didn't say another word. He turned, pushed his cart away, and disappeared into the shadows of the hangar. Vivian tried to laugh again, but it didn't come out right. There was something in his eyes she couldn't shake. Something that didn't belong to a homeless janitor. When she finally stepped outside later that night, the cap was still in her hand. It smelled faintly of jet fuel and something older, regret. She looked toward the empty lot where he'd vanished. For the first time in years, Vivian Prescott felt a flicker of curiosity that wasn't born of arrogance. It was something else entirely. Something dangerously close to respect. And maybe a touch of shame. If you were in Vivian's place, would you have mocked him or asked who he really was? Comment your thoughts below. ACT2, the emotional spark, approximate 1,000 words. Rain fell over Savannah the next afternoon, soft but persistent, washing the tarmac in silver light. The private airfield was quieter now. No laughter, no parties, just the sound of water on metal wings and the distant hum of engines waiting for clearance. Vivian stood inside the hangar alone, her heels clicking faintly on the polished floor. She'd come early, hoping to catch her father before his flight to Miami, but he'd already left. The silence felt strange. Yesterday's moment, the mocking dare, the way that man had looked at her, wouldn't stop replaying in her mind. She tried to shrug it off. "You were just having fun," she muttered under her breath, adjusting her scarf. But it didn't sound convincing, even to herself. Then she saw him again. Caleb. He was wiping down the landing gear of the same Gulfstream from the night before, sleeves rolled up, soaked through. The rain didn't seem to bother him. His movements were careful, practiced, almost reverent. Like the plane was sacred to him. Vivian watched from a distance, arms folded. "Hey," she called out finally, walking closer. "You again. Didn't think you'd show your face after last night." He didn't look up right away. When he did, there was no bitterness in his eyes. Only a calm so deep it made her uneasy. "I work here. Faces don't matter much when you're just cleaning up other people's messes." She frowned. "You've got a smart mouth for someone in your position. And you've got a loud one for someone who doesn't listen," he replied evenly. Her jaw dropped a little. No one ever spoke to her like that. For a moment, neither said anything. The rain drummed on the metal roof. Then Vivian crossed her arms tighter. "You said you've flown before. That true? Or were you just trying to save face?" He wiped his hands with a rag, looking up at her. "It was true." "Military?" she asked skeptically. He nodded once. She raised an eyebrow. "You're telling me a man who used to fly jets is now mopping hangar floors?" Caleb's voice was steady but low. Sometimes life takes the controls out of your hands. Something in the way he said it, simple, unadorned, made her heartbeat shift rhythm. Vivian studied him, searching his face for lies. He didn't flinch under her gaze. His eyes carried something heavy. Years, maybe decades, of unspoken loss. "All right then, Mr. Ex-Pilot," she said finally, a note of challenge creeping back in. "If you were really one of us, prove it. Show me you can still start that plane." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "That's not a toy. It's not something you prove." But Vivian wasn't used to being told no. "Come on. What are you afraid of? That you forgot how?" He stood up straight, and for a split second, she regretted the words. Because when he looked at her this time, the calm was gone. "Don't mistake humility for fear," he said quietly. And before she could stop him, he climbed the short stairs into the jet's cockpit. Vivian froze. "Wait, you can't just..." The sound of the engines turning over cut her off. The deep mechanical rumble filled the hangar like thunder. Every gauge lit up. Every switch flipped in perfect rhythm. She stared through the cockpit glass, rain running down her cheeks, watching his hands move across the controls like a concert pianist returning to an old instrument. He wasn't just familiar with the plane. He was intimate with it. For the first time, Vivian saw something she hadn't before: command, precision, grace. When he powered the systems down and stepped out again, she could barely speak. How did you do that? This jet's not even on the regular circuit anymore." Caleb's voice was low. "Because I've flown it before." Vivian's lips parted in disbelief. "That's impossible. My father's company bought this plane from a decommissioned military auction. It's been grounded for years." He looked past her, toward the open hangar doors where the rain fell like smoke. "Yeah," he said softly. "I remember the auction." Her voice dropped. "Who are you?" Caleb didn't answer. He just started walking toward the back exit, his silhouette fading against the gray light. "Wait." Vivian called after him. He stopped but didn't turn around. "You could have said something last night," she said, her tone shifting from defensive to hesitant. Why didn't you? He took a breath, his voice barely audible over the rain. Because it wouldn't have changed what you saw. Vivian frowned. What I saw. He turned to face her finally. A homeless man. The simplicity of it cut through her. He walked away, leaving her standing alone beside the jet, her own reflection faintly visible in its polished silver body. For the first time, she didn't like what she saw looking back. Later that evening, when she sat in her car staring at the rain-drenched windshield, she couldn't shake the sound of that engine, the rhythm of his hands on the controls, the authority in his voice when he said, "Don't mistake humility for fear." It haunted her, not because it embarrassed her, but because it humbled her. She had mocked him to feel powerful, but now she couldn't stop wondering, what kind of man walks away from the sky and ends up here? Her phone buzzed, her father calling. She silenced it. Instead, she whispered to herself, Caleb Turner, tasting the name she'd overheard from one of the crew logs earlier. And something inside her shifted, something that had been asleep far too long. She didn't know it yet, but that single moment, the sound of the jet coming alive under his hands, was the spark that would burn through both their lives. If you were Vivian, would you want to know the truth about his past, or let it stay buried? Comment your thoughts below. The next few days at the Prescott Aviation hangar were strangely tense. The laughter that usually echoed between the jets had dulled into murmurs. Rumors spread quickly. Someone had seen the janitor start one of the aircraft as if he'd been born in that cockpit. No one knew his story, but everyone suddenly spoke his name in cautious tones. Vivian tried to ignore it. She buried herself in flight schedules, meetings, and training sessions. But Caleb Turner had already found a place in the quiet of her mind that she couldn't shut out. Every time she saw a jet, she imagined his hands on the controls. Every time she gave an order, she wondered if he would have done it differently, and better. She didn't like the feeling. Vivian Prescott didn't wonder about people like him. She didn't question the order of her world. Yet here she was, glancing toward the hangar door every time she heard a mop bucket roll past, as if she might catch him again. When she did see him, on the fourth day, she forced herself to speak with detached formality. Caleb, right? He nodded, without looking up from the engine part he was cleaning. I need to talk to you, she said. He glanced up this time, his eyes steady. About what? The other day. You started that jet like you'd done it 1,000 times. I have, he replied. Then why are you here? Why aren't you flying anymore? He straightened, wiping his hands. Because flying isn't always freedom. Sometimes it's the thing that breaks you. She frowned, not understanding. That doesn't make sense. He gave a small, sad smile. It will someday. Then he turned back to his work, effectively ending the conversation. Vivian stood there for a moment, flustered. You can't just walk away when someone's asking you a question. I'm not walking away, he said quietly. I'm staying out of your way. She clenched her jaw, wanting to argue, but the weight in his voice stopped her. It wasn't defiance, it was resignation. Later that evening, she vented to Janelle over dinner at a downtown bistro. He acts like I did something wrong, Vivian said, stirring her drink aggressively. Like I should apologize to him. Janelle raised an eyebrow. Shouldn't you? Vivian froze. Excuse me. Viv, you mocked a homeless man in front of 20 people and dared him to fly a jet, Janelle said plainly. He proved you wrong, and now your ego's bruised. Vivian looked away, her throat tightening. You're saying I should go find him and say sorry? I'm saying maybe he's not who you think he is. Maybe you should stop judging people by their altitude. Vivian pushed her drink aside. You sound like a self-help book. But Janelle's words stayed with her. That night, when Vivian returned to the airfield to pick up a forgotten logbook, she saw the janitorial lights still on in the hangar. Caleb was there, mopping the floor under one of the smaller aircraft, humming quietly to himself. She lingered near the entrance for a full minute before walking in. You work late. He didn't look up. Work's honest. Keeps me from thinking too much. About what? About how life changes mid-flight, he said, still mopping. 1 minute you're at cruising altitude. The next, you're falling. Vivian crossed her arms. You talk like a poet, not a pilot. He gave a faint chuckle. Same thing sometimes. Both deal in turbulence. Something about that made her laugh, softly but genuinely. It startled both of them. Caleb finally set the mop aside. What do you really want, Miss Prescott? She hesitated. To understand. Understand what? Why someone like you ended up here. He studied her for a long moment. And what would you do with that understanding? Her voice dropped. Maybe stop judging people so quickly. Caleb's expression softened, but only for a second. People don't change that easily. Maybe I'm trying, she said. He looked at her, really looked this time, and something flickered in his eyes, something she couldn't read. Trying doesn't erase what's already been said. Her shoulders sank. You're right. He nodded once, as if accepting that was enough. Then he returned to his mop, ending the conversation again. Vivian stood there, watching him work, unsure whether to walk away or stay. The sound of the rain outside began again, tapping against the hangar roof. It was softer this time, almost forgiving. Caleb, she said suddenly. He stopped but didn't turn around. I'm sorry. The silence that followed was thick enough to drown in. He didn't respond right away. When he finally did, his voice was quiet, steady. Thank you. Then he resumed mopping, as if the words had settled something fragile between them. Vivian left the hangar with her heart pounding. She didn't know what she expected. Absolution, maybe. But she couldn't stop thinking about his words. Flying isn't always freedom. That night, she searched his name online. No social media, no recent records, just a handful of military articles from 8 years ago. One headline caught her breath. Air Force Captain Caleb Turner grounded after rescue mission ends in tragedy. The photo showed him in uniform, standing beside a rescue chopper, smiling. He looked like a different man, confident, alive. Vivian read every word. A classified mission. A mechanical failure midair. Lives lost. One survivor, the pilot. Discharged. Vanished. Her throat went dry. Now she understood what he meant by falling. And for the first time in her life, Vivian Prescott felt something she couldn't label. Shame mixed with admiration, guilt tangled with wonder. If you discovered someone you mocked carried that kind of pain, would you still be able to look them in the eye? Comment your thoughts below. The storm rolled in without warning. Savannah's skies had been moody all day, but now thunder cracked open the night, like something angry had been waiting to escape. Vivian had stayed late again, determined to confront Caleb properly this time. She'd printed the article she found, his article, and folded it neatly in her jacket pocket. She didn't know what she would say, only that she needed to see him, to look him in the eye and tell him she was sorry, not just for mocking him, but for not seeing him sooner. By the time she reached the hangar, rain lashed the windows so hard the sound felt alive. The power flickered once, twice, then settled into a dim, emergency glow. The rest of the airfield had gone silent. Only one light burned from inside the main hangar, where Caleb worked. He was tightening a hydraulic line beneath one of the maintenance jets when she stepped in, her heels splashing against puddles forming from the leaky roof. Caleb, she called out. He didn't look up right away. Miss Prescott, you shouldn't be here in this weather. Power's unstable. I came to talk. He sighed, wiping his hands. You've done enough talking for a lifetime. Lightning flashed across the skylight, bleaching the room white for a split second. When the thunder followed, it rattled the entire hangar. Vivian flinched but stood her ground. I read about you. About the rescue mission. Caleb froze, shoulders tense. That's old news. It's your story, she said softly. And it's not finished. He turned, finally meeting her gaze. His eyes were darker than usual, like the storm had taken residence inside them. You shouldn't have dug into my past. I had to understand. There's nothing to understand, he snapped. Then quieter. I failed. People died. That's all there is. You didn't fail, she insisted. You don't, he cut in sharply. You don't know what happened. Vivian reached into her pocket, pulling out the folded paper. Then tell me. Caleb stared at it for a long time, then took it slowly, his fingers brushing hers. His skin was rough, calloused, but warm. He unfolded it, scanning the words that had once defined him to the world. I tried to save them, he said finally, his voice breaking slightly. We were extracting civilians after a supply drop went bad. The chopper took enemy fire. We lost hydraulics. I made a choice, to land near the river, not the ridge. The ridge meant instant death. The river meant, maybe survival. Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. Didn't anyone make it? One, he said, his eyes far away. A boy, 12 years old. But 2 of my men didn't. The report says mechanical failure, but that doesn't erase the faces. The rain hammered harder. Vivian stepped closer. You saved a life. That matters. He shook his head. You don't understand, Miss Prescott. I didn't just lose them. I lost everything after that. They grounded me, stripped my wings. I tried to find other work, but everywhere I went, people saw the failure before the man. Her throat tightened. And you ended up here. He looked around the dim hangar. Yeah, here. Lightning cracked again, and this time the lights flickered out completely. The hum of machinery died. The hangar plunged into darkness, save for the flash of stormlight seeping through the windows. Vivian gasped. The generator. Backup should kick in, Caleb said, though his tone carried doubt. Until then, stay close. The hangar doors might not hold in this wind. As if on cue, a violent gust slammed into the outer panels. Metal groaned like a wounded animal. Come on, he said, grabbing a flashlight from his workbench. We'll wait it out in the cockpit. It's reinforced. Vivian hesitated. The same jet. He nodded. You trust me? She met his gaze. I think I finally do. They climbed up the metal stairs into the cockpit of the Gulfstream. Rain pelted the windshield, lightning slicing the darkness beyond. Inside, it felt strangely safe. The tight space, the hum of rain on steel, the faint scent of fuel and leather. Caleb set the flashlight between the seats, its beam flickering faintly. Vivian sat in the co-pilot's seat, running her fingers along the worn controls. So this is where you lived your life. He gave a small smile. Yeah, up there, everything made sense. Down here, not so much. You miss it. Every day. He paused. But missing something doesn't bring it back. Silence fell between them. The storm outside roared, but inside, the quiet grew heavy. Vivian finally broke it. Do you ever wish you'd gone down with them? Caleb turned sharply. What kind of question is that? The kind you ask when you've lost something that defined you. He stared at her, realizing how much truth hid behind her words. Yeah, he said softly. I wish that more times than I can count. But wishing doesn't change what's left. Vivian looked down. I know that feeling. He tilted his head. Do you? My mother died in a crash, she said quietly. My father never talks about it. But I saw it happen from the ground. I was 9. She was flying one of our company's test planes. A malfunction. They said she went down calm. No panic, no distress call. I think she knew she wasn't coming back. Caleb's expression softened. I didn't know. I don't talk about it. Her eyes shimmered in the dim light. Maybe that's why I fly, to feel closer to her. But sometimes I think I'm just chasing ghosts. He leaned back, his voice gentler now. Then maybe that's what we both are. 2 ghosts trying to remember how to live. The hangar moaned again, metal shuddering. Caleb glanced up. The storm's getting worse. Are we safe in here? He hesitated. Safe enough. Unless the power grid shorts again. As if summoned, the flashlight flickered, then went out, plunging them into near darkness. Vivian instinctively reached for him. Her hand found his arm, trembling slightly. It's all right, he murmured. Just power. Her voice was small. I hate the dark. He chuckled softly. Most pilots do. You learn to trust your instruments, not your eyes. But what if the instruments fail? Then you trust your gut. For a moment, neither spoke. Rain hissed against the glass, thunder rumbling like a heartbeat. Vivian's hand was still on his arm, her fingers gripping lightly. You're warm, she said, almost to herself. He smiled faintly. You're shaking. I'm not cold, she whispered. Something shifted in the air, an unspoken current neither dared name. Caleb turned slightly, close enough to see the glint of her eyes in the dark. You shouldn't be here, he said softly. Then tell me to leave. He didn't. Instead, he said, you're not the woman I thought you were. Vivian smiled faintly. And you're not the man I let myself believe you were. Another roll of thunder broke the tension for a moment, but neither moved away. Outside, the world was chaos. Inside, they were still. Hours passed. The storm didn't let up. The 2 of them sat in that cockpit, the only light the occasional flicker of lightning slicing through the hangar windows. Vivian had taken off her soaked jacket, draping it over the seat. Her hair clung to her neck in damp curls. Caleb tried not to notice, but it was impossible not to. So what happens next? She asked quietly. He turned toward her. What do you mean? You said wishing doesn't change what's left. So what is left, Caleb? He sighed. Work. Days that look the same. Nights that last too long. She studied him. You don't believe in redemption? He hesitated. Redemption's for people who haven't already burned their bridges. Vivian leaned closer. Maybe someone's waiting on the other side of that bridge. He looked at her for a long moment. You talk like someone who believes people can change. I have to, she said simply. Otherwise, what's the point of flying? You go up there to see the world differently, to see yourself differently. He smiled faintly. You sound like a pilot. I am one. He shook his head. No, I mean, one who flies with her heart, not her ego. She laughed softly. Careful. You almost sound like you admire me. Almost, he said, smiling back. The laughter between them faded into something quieter. Intimate. Vivian's voice softened. You could come back, you know? Teach. Train. There are programs for veterans. He cut her off gently. That's not me anymore. Then who are you? He exhaled. Just a man trying to find peace. Vivian reached into her pocket again, pulling out a small pin, her mother's flight wings. These belong to her. I keep them as a reminder that courage isn't always about flying. Sometimes it's about coming back down. She placed the pin on the console between them. Maybe you should hold on to them for a while. Caleb stared at the wings, emotion flickering in his eyes. I can't take that. You can, she said softly. Because I think you need them more than I do. He took them carefully, his fingers brushing hers again. Thank you. Lightning flashed again, illuminating their faces in silver light. For a moment, it looked as though the storm outside had frozen. Two lost souls suspended in time. Vivian smiled faintly. I think maybe the storm's calming. Caleb glanced out the windshield. The rain had softened, the thunder fading into the distance. Looks like we made it through. Together, she said quietly. He looked at her again, really looked, and something inside him eased. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was something deeper, a shared understanding born not from words, but from pain recognized and accepted. Vivian leaned back, exhaling. You know, I used to think people like you didn't exist anymore. He chuckled softly. People like me? People who fall, but still have the courage to stand again. He smiled, the first real one she'd seen. You'd be surprised how many of us are still trying. The lights flickered back on just then, a low hum filling the cockpit as the generator reconnected. Vivian blinked at the sudden brightness. Power's back. Guess the storm's finally over, he said. But neither of them moved. The world outside had reset, but something inside them had changed permanently. When they finally stepped out of the jet, dawn was breaking. The hangar floor shimmered with puddles reflecting streaks of gold and pink from the morning sky. Vivian paused at the door, turning to him. You'll be here tomorrow? Caleb met her gaze. If the hangar still needs cleaning. She smiled softly. Maybe it needs a pilot instead. He shook his head, but his eyes said something else, something hopeful. As she walked away, he looked down at the wings still in his hand. The metal glinted faintly in the new sunlight. For the first time in years, Caleb Turner felt something stirred deep in his chest. Not regret. Not guilt. But the faint, rising hum of possibility. If life gave you one more chance to rise after the fall, would you take it? Or stay grounded forever? Comment your thoughts below. The hangar was quiet again after the storm, but the air between them still hummed with everything left unsaid. The rain had passed, leaving the runway slick and gleaming under the floodlights. Caleb sat on an overturned crate, his shoulders hunched, hands still trembling from the memory of her lips, so close, too close. Vivian was across from him, legs drawn to her chest, the leather of her boots squeaking softly as she shifted. Neither spoke for a long while. Only the metallic drip of water from the ceiling filled the silence. Finally, she said, You're not who you say you are. Caleb's head jerked slightly, eyes narrowing. What makes you think that? You look at the planes like they belong to you, she whispered. You talk about flying like it's muscle memory. You move like someone who's been here before, someone who lost something here. He didn't answer. He only leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the ground. I've been around liars before, Vivian said softly. People who hide behind half-truths. But you're hiding behind guilt. That word hit him hard. Guilt. He clenched his jaw, eyes glassy in the dim light. You don't know what you're talking about. Then tell me, she pressed gently. Tell me who you are, Caleb Turner. He exhaled slowly, the sound rough and uneven. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. The air thickened. He rose, pacing the narrow space of the hangar. Then, in a voice raw and shaking, he began. I was a pilot once, he said. For Prescott Air. Vivian froze. He continued, voice barely above a whisper. 6 years ago, I was the youngest captain they'd ever had. Had my own house in Savannah, a car I didn't need, and a family I thought would never leave me. My wife, my son. He stopped, pressing a hand to his forehead as though the memories themselves burned. One night, I was scheduled to fly from Miami to Atlanta. I switched shifts with another pilot at the last minute. He took my place. Vivian's breath caught. She knew that route. She knew what came next. That flight went down, Caleb said, voice breaking. Engine failure. Everyone on board died. Vivian stared at him, the pieces snapping together in her mind. Her mother's plane, the one that crashed over the Everglades. Her throat tightened. Flight 327, she whispered. He nodded slowly. You know it. My mother was on that flight, she said, her voice trembling. She was the lead flight attendant. The silence that followed was absolute. Caleb's lips parted, but no sound came out. He looked like someone who'd just been punched in the gut. I didn't know, he finally said. Vivian, I swear I didn't know. Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them back hard. You were supposed to be on that plane? Yes, he said hoarsely. If I hadn't swapped that shift, I'd have gone down with them. Vivian stood, trembling. So you lived? And my mother didn't. I've lived with that every day since, he said, his voice cracking. I lost my family in the wreckage of that night too. My wife blamed me, said it should have been me. I believed her. I walked away from everything, my career, my home. I couldn't set foot in a cockpit again. Vivian covered her mouth with her hand, sobs rising in her chest. Caleb, that crash destroyed everything for me. I was 17. I watched my mother board that plane. She promised she'd call when she landed. He moved closer, hands half raised, desperate but afraid to touch her. Vivian, I never meant. Don't. Her voice was sharp, full of pain. Don't say you're sorry. Sorry doesn't bring her back. He stopped in his tracks, guilt flickering across his face like lightning. I've hated pilots for years, she whispered. Every time I see a jet, I think of her. I think of how calm she looked waving from the gate. And now you tell me you were supposed to be there. I've asked myself 1,000 times why I wasn't, Caleb said softly. Why I lived when she didn't. Why I traded that flight. I thought walking away would make it right somehow. But it never did. She shook her head, tears spilling freely now. You lied to me. You let me sit here and open up to you while you kept that from me. I didn't know, he repeated, pain thick in his voice. Not until you said her name. Vivian turned away, her whole body trembling. She pressed her hands to her temples, as if trying to stop her world from spinning. How do I even look at you now? She whispered. He stepped closer, his voice quiet but urgent. Maybe you're supposed to. Maybe you were meant to see the man I became after that night. Not the pilot who lived, but the man who's been trying to earn the right to live ever since. She turned slowly to face him. His eyes were wet, his face drawn and tired, but there was truth there, unvarnished, brutal truth. And for the first time, she didn't see a stranger. She saw a man bound to her pain in ways neither of them could have imagined. The storm outside had passed, but another one had begun inside her chest, a storm of grief, confusion, and something deeper she couldn't yet name. Caleb finally spoke, his voice hoarse. I understand if you hate me, but please, don't walk away without knowing the whole story. Vivian met his gaze, tears glistening in her eyes. Then tell me everything. He nodded slowly. You deserve that much. He took a deep breath and began to speak again, but this time, his words carried a different kind of weight. Confession, not just explanation. Caleb sat back down on the crate, the floodlight throwing harsh shadows across his face. The silence between them stretched, dense and painful, but he didn't look away this time. I wasn't supposed to be anywhere near that flight, he said quietly. My son, Jacob, he'd been sick for weeks. High fever, asthma, the kind that keeps you up all night listening to every breath he takes. My wife, Lillian, she begged me to stay home. But I was addicted to the sky, to the rush of it. So I told her I'd take one more shift and be back before dawn. Vivian listened, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. The morning of the flight, he continued, Jacob woke up wheezing so bad we had to take him to the hospital. I called the airline, begged for someone to take my route. A friend, Elliot Mercer, said he'd cover for me. He had 2 kids of his own. He told me not to worry. Caleb's voice cracked. I saw him that afternoon. He winked at me before boarding. I never saw him again. The words hit like stones. Vivian's eyes filled again, but she didn't look away. Caleb rubbed his hands together, his tone trembling. After the crash, I couldn't breathe. I watched the news that night, saw the fire lighting up the sky, heard the reporter say there were no survivors. I kept thinking I should have been there instead. That if I hadn't been weak, if I hadn't chosen my son over my duty, none of them would have died. Vivian's voice was soft, almost a whisper. You were a father protecting his child. That's not weakness. He shook his head. Try telling that to the families. Try telling that to Lillian when she looked at me like I was a ghost she couldn't stand to see. His eyes lifted to hers, full of quiet pain. I lost them both. Lillian took Jacob and left. Said she couldn't raise him around a man who lived on borrowed time. Vivian's throat ached. So you walked away from flying. I walked away from everything, Caleb said. From God, from myself. I slept in my truck, then under bridges. I'd rather starve than be near another plane. He paused, his voice almost breaking. Until that day I saw you outside the hangar. You were staring at the sky like it had betrayed you too. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. Vivian's eyes softened despite herself. You thought I was just some angry woman. I thought you were me, he admitted. Trying to bury something that wouldn't stay buried. The hangar was silent except for the faint hum of electricity. Then she stood, stepping closer until the distance between them was only a breath. My mother always said pilots had hearts made of clouds, she murmured. Soft, but untouchable. I used to hate her for saying that after she died. But now I think maybe she was right. Caleb's gaze searched hers. And what do you see now? She hesitated, the anger in her chest fading into something quieter, more complicated. A man still standing in the wreckage, waiting for someone to tell him he can move again. He blinked, surprised. And do you think I deserve that? Vivian's lips trembled. I don't know, but maybe we both do. The moment hung between them, fragile as glass. Outside, the rain began again, soft this time, rhythmic, like a heartbeat on the roof. Caleb took a slow breath, and Vivian could feel the shift in the air, something changing between them. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But understanding. He whispered. I never told anyone that story before. Why me? She asked. Because you were the first person who didn't look away when I said I used to fly. Vivian turned toward the open hangar door. The sky beyond was dark, but clearing, the moon peeking through fractured clouds. Maybe it's time you looked up again. Caleb followed her gaze, eyes reflecting silver light. I don't think I can. Then let me help you, she said softly. He looked at her, and for the first time in years, something like hope flickered behind his tired eyes. Caleb stayed sitting there as Vivian walked toward the back of the hangar. The rain had thinned to mist, the kind that settled over everything and made metal smell like old blood and oil. She moved slowly, her hands tracing along the workbench where the tools lay scattered. Something caught her eye, a faded leather bag tucked beneath an old tarp. She pulled it out and placed it on the bench. The initials CT were embossed near the flap. The clasp stuck for a second before it opened with a soft click. Inside were a few worn photos, a folded piece of paper, and a pair of pilot's wings dulled by time. Caleb's head lifted when he heard her gasp. Vivian. But she was already holding the letter, her eyes scanning the trembling handwriting. The date made her heart lurch. It was written 2 days after the crash. Elliot's wife came today, it read. She said they found his watch in the wreckage. I told her it should have been mine. She cried and said no, you were meant to stay. But what kind of man trades his life for another's and still calls himself a hero? I can't fly again. I can't breathe. If I ever touch the sky again, it should strike me down. Her throat tightened. The ink was smudged where a tear had fallen, years ago. Caleb stood, but didn't move closer. That letter wasn't meant for anyone to read. I had to, she said, voice shaking. You've been punishing yourself all this time. He rubbed the back of his neck, silent. Vivian placed the letter down gently, then picked up one of the photographs. A little boy grinned at the camera, a model plane clutched in his hands. Caleb stood behind him, beaming. His eyes, so bright then, looked like they belonged to another man. This is Jacob, she asked. He nodded once. He's 11 now. Lives with his mother in North Carolina. You don't see him? Not since he turned 5. Lillian said I had too much darkness in me. I didn't fight her. I figured she was right. Vivian turned toward him. You don't get to decide that. You made one choice to save your son. That's not darkness, Caleb. That's love. He let out a broken laugh. It doesn't feel like love when the world burns for it. For a moment, she wanted to step closer, to touch his hand, to take the ache from his voice. Instead, she said, "You're not the only one who's been living with ghosts." He looked up, puzzled. "My mother's death wrecked my life. I was angry at everyone. Her co-workers, the airline, God. I thought if I stayed angry long enough, I wouldn't have to admit how much I missed her." Her voice faltered. "But I do. Every day." Caleb swallowed hard. "You never got to say goodbye." "No," she whispered. "And now I find out the man who was supposed to be there, the man who lived instead, is sitting in front of me." She stepped closer until she could see the lines beneath his eyes, the exhaustion, the guilt. Maybe we were meant to meet. Maybe not to forgive each other, but to let the dead rest. Caleb's chest rose and fell in uneven rhythm. "You think that's possible?" She looked at the letter again, then at him. "It has to be. Because if it isn't, then what's left for either of us?" The lights flickered as thunder rolled far away. The storm was moving out, but its echo stayed trapped in the metal ribs of the hangar. Caleb took a step forward, the distance between them shrinking to almost nothing. "I've wanted to tell someone the truth for so long, but every time I tried, the words felt too heavy to carry." "You carried worse," she said gently. "You survived the weight of living." Something in his face broke open then, a silent collapse, like an old structure giving way. Tears spilled over, but he didn't turn away. He let her see. Vivian reached up, her hand hovering near his cheek before she touched him, lightly, like testing if he was real. His skin was warm beneath her fingertips. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she whispered. He nodded. "I don't expect you to. But I can see you," she said. "And maybe that's the first step." He closed his eyes for a moment, exhaling a long, trembling breath. When he opened them again, she was still there, still watching him, not with pity, but with a quiet, aching humanity. For a long time, they stood there in silence, two people bound by tragedy, tethered now by something neither had expected. Recognition. Outside, dawn began to bleed slowly across the sky, pale and new. The rain had stopped. Vivian looked toward the light and said, "Maybe it's time you showed me what flying feels like." Caleb blinked, startled. "What?" "You said you'd never fly again," she said, a small, knowing smile forming. "But maybe that's the one thing that can save you." He hesitated, torn between fear and longing. "Vivian." She met his eyes. "You're not the only one who needs to let go." Her voice lingered in the space between them, fragile but resolute. And for the first time in years, Caleb felt something stir inside him, a pull toward the sky that didn't feel like punishment anymore. Morning light spilled across the runway like molten gold. The hangar doors were open now, and the damp air smelled of wet concrete and kerosene. Caleb stood just outside, staring at the horizon as though the sun itself were testing his courage. The world felt raw and quiet, like something had been broken open during the night. Vivian emerged from inside, her hair pulled back, eyes softer than he'd ever seen them. She held 2 paper cups of coffee, one steaming, one already cooling. Without a word, she handed him the hotter one. "Thank you," he said quietly. She shrugged. "Don't thank me yet. I still haven't decided if I like you." He smiled faintly, the first real one she'd seen on his face. "That's fair." They stood side by side, sipping in silence. Above them, a single jet roared faintly in the distance, its contrail cutting a white wound through the blue. Caleb flinched at the sound, but he didn't look away. Vivian noticed. "It still gets you." "Every time," he admitted. "It's like hearing a voice I thought I'd buried." She turned to study him, the way his shoulders stiffened, the way his jaw tightened with the memory. "Maybe that voice isn't haunting you," she said softly. "Maybe it's calling you back." He glanced at her. "And you think I should answer?" "I think you already did," she said, "when you told me the truth." The hangar was warm with the smell of oil and dust, but something gentler lingered between them now. The tension that once made every word sharp had softened into a quiet rhythm, a shared heartbeat beneath their silence. "Vivian," Caleb said, setting down his cup. "I've spent 6 years trying to make myself disappear. Every time someone saw me, I felt like I was stealing air that wasn't mine. But last night, talking to you, it was the first time I felt like maybe I could exist again." She swallowed hard. "You don't have to ask permission to live." His voice was low. "Then what do I do with all of it? The guilt, the loss." "Carry it differently," she said. "Not as a weight, but as proof that you survived." He looked at her, the morning sun catching in her dark eyes. There was no sermon in her words, no pity, just truth. He'd forgotten how grounding truth could feel. "I want to show you something," he said. He led her to the far end of the hangar, where an old two-seater plane sat beneath a tarp. Its paint was faded, one wing patched crudely with rivets and hope. Vivian stared. "You kept this?" "It was the first plane I ever flew," Caleb said. "She's not much to look at now, but she still has a heartbeat." He ran a hand along the metal, affection etched into every motion. Vivian could see it in him. The man he used to be, the one who loved the sky like a first language. "Does it still fly?" she asked. Caleb smiled faintly. "Only if you believe in miracles." Vivian stepped closer, touching the fuselage with reverence. "Then maybe we should try." He hesitated. "I told myself I'd never go back up. Not after." "I know," she said. "But if you don't, you'll keep reliving the crash. You can't heal from something you won't face." He looked at her for a long moment, the air between them thick with unspoken things, fear, courage, the fragile possibility of redemption. Finally, he nodded. "All right. But if we go up there, you're in the seat beside me." Her lips curved. "Wouldn't have it any other way." They spent the next hour preparing the plane, the hum of work blending with the soft murmur of their voices. Vivian read from the manual, teasing him when he corrected her too quickly. He laughed under his breath, surprised at how natural it felt. By the time the sun was high, the engine coughed to life, stuttering like an old heart remembering how to beat. The vibration filled the hangar, the sound both terrifying and beautiful. Vivian grinned, the wind whipping her curls. "You ready?" Caleb exhaled, hands trembling on the controls. "Not even close." "Good," she said. "Means you're alive." The plane rolled forward, the wheels bumping along the cracked tarmac. For a heartbeat, Caleb's fear clawed at him. The flash of flames, the roar of an engine dying midair. But Vivian's hand brushed his, steady and sure. "Look ahead," she said. "Not back." He did. The runway blurred beneath them, the engine's growl deepening, and then, suddenly, they were rising. The earth fell away, savanna spread beneath them in gold and green. Caleb's breath caught. The sky wasn't the grave he remembered. It was open, infinite. Vivian's laughter broke through the wind. "You're doing it." He looked over, sunlight catching her smile. For a second, he saw her mother in that smile. The same courage, the same grace, and the ache in his chest eased. "I forgot what it felt like," he said softly. "What?" "To be free." They leveled out, gliding over the marshlands where light shimmered off the water. The air was smooth, the horizon endless. For the first time in years, Caleb didn't feel like he was running. Vivian leaned back, her voice almost carried away by the wind. "Maybe freedom isn't leaving everything behind. Maybe it's learning to live with it." He nodded slowly, his hands steady on the controls. "You sound like someone who belongs up here." She smiled. "Maybe I do." They flew in silence, the world below like a quiet promise. The weight that had pressed on them both, the grief, the guilt, felt lighter, not gone, but changed. When they finally landed, the plane's wheels kissed the ground gently, a small mercy of a landing. Caleb cut the engine, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Vivian turned to him. "So what now?" Caleb exhaled slowly, a small, genuine smile on his face. "Now, I think I start living again." She smiled back, and for the first time, it didn't feel like two broken people trying to make sense of loss. It felt like two survivors learning how to begin. 2 weeks later, the sky was clear over Savannah, a rare expanse of endless blue that seemed to hum with quiet purpose. The hangar had changed, cleaner, brighter. The broken tools had been put away, the floor swept, the air alive with motion again. Caleb stood in the doorway, his flight jacket zipped halfway, his eyes on the horizon. Vivian was inside, sorting through a stack of maintenance logs. She looked up when she felt his shadow fall across her papers. "You're up early," she said, smiling softly. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted. "Big day." She set the papers aside. "Are you sure about this?" He hesitated, then nodded. "It's time." Today wasn't just another flight. It was a return, a public one. For the first time since the crash, Caleb had agreed to fly a demonstration route at the community airfield. It wasn't much, just a small charity event for kids, but it felt monumental. Vivian would be there, not as a passenger this time, but as his co-pilot in spirit. As he walked to the plane, The same old two-seater they'd restored. He caught sight of something taped near the instrument panel. It was a photograph. Vivian's mother, smiling in her flight uniform, sunlight spilling across her face. He froze. "You did this." Vivian nodded from behind him. "I thought maybe she'd want to see you fly." For a long moment, he couldn't speak. He traced a finger along the edge of the photo, his throat tight. "Thank you." She met his eyes. "Do it for both of you." He climbed into the cockpit, fingers brushing over the controls like greeting an old friend. The familiar scent of fuel and leather filled his lungs. The fear was still there, but it no longer owned him. Vivian stood near the runway, watching as the engine roared to life. The sound no longer felt like thunder. It felt like resurrection. The plane began to roll. Caleb's heart pounded as the ground rushed beneath him. Faster, faster, then lifted. Up there, above the earth, everything fell away. The pain, the guilt, the noise. Only the wind remained. Caleb laughed, really laughed, as the plane soared higher. The sunlight hit his face, and for a heartbeat, he could almost feel Elliot beside him, grinning like he used to. He spoke aloud, voice trembling but sure. "I'm still here, brother." On the ground, Vivian wiped at her eyes. Watching him fly wasn't just beautiful, it was healing. When he landed 20 minutes later, the crowd cheered, but Caleb didn't hear them. His eyes found Vivian first. She was smiling through tears, clapping slowly, proudly. He climbed out of the cockpit, his legs unsteady, and walked toward her. For the first time since she met him, he stood tall, not as a broken man, but as someone who'd finally come home to himself. "You did it," she said. "We did it," he corrected. She stepped closer. "How does it feel?" He took a deep breath. "Like forgiveness." They stood in silence for a long time, the wind tugging gently at their clothes. Around them, the airfield buzzed with laughter and applause, but they heard only the quiet between their heartbeats. Then Vivian said, softly, "You know, she would have been proud of you." Caleb smiled faintly. "I think she already is." The afternoon sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft, orange light. A flock of geese crossed the horizon, their wings beating steady and sure. Caleb watched them, then turned to Vivian. "You ever think about learning to fly?" he asked. She laughed. "You offering lessons?" He nodded. "First one's free. Payment accepted in coffee and patience." "Patience I can manage," she said, still smiling. "Coffee maybe." Their laughter carried across the tarmac, light, unburdened. The kind of laughter that comes only after surviving the worst of yourself. As the last of the sun disappeared, Caleb looked once more at the sky that had once haunted him. It no longer looked like a grave. It looked like a promise. "Ready?" he asked. Vivian tilted her head. "For what?" "For tomorrow," he said simply. And for the first time, she believed him. They turned together, walking back toward the hangar, two silhouettes against a golden sky. The pilot who fell, and the woman who helped him rise. The door closed behind them with a soft echo. Outside, a plane soared past, its wings catching the last light of day, flying not away, but home. The next morning dawned cold and sharp. Savannah's usual warmth had retreated, leaving the air brittle and gray. Caleb stood by the river, jacket zipped to his throat, watching the water ripple beneath the bridge. The sound reminded him of the storm the night he'd met Vivian. How the world had seemed ready to swallow him whole. He hadn't seen her since the flight. She'd vanished after the crowd dispersed, leaving only a note on the hangar door. Sometimes healing means stepping back before you step forward. He'd read that line 100 times. Each time, it cut a little deeper. Vivian hadn't meant to disappear. But after watching him fly, after feeling that rush of light break through years of darkness, something inside her had cracked open too. She needed space, to face her own ghosts, not just his. So she left the airfield and took the old highway out toward her mother's memorial site, a small patch of land overlooking the coast. Now, 3 days later, she sat there, her knees pulled to her chest, staring at the plaque bearing her mother's name. "Mom," she whispered. "He did it. He flew again." Her voice trembled. "And I thought I'd feel peace after that, but I just feel empty, like I don't know what comes next." The sea breeze lifted her hair, carrying the scent of salt and pine. She closed her eyes. "He's not who I thought he was. He's more. He's everything I didn't want to forgive, and everything I needed to." She touched the cool metal of the plaque. "Would you forgive him if you were here? Or would you tell me to run before it hurts more?" Her voice broke. Because I think I'm falling for him, and that terrifies me. Back by the river, Caleb pulled out his phone for the 10th time that morning. He'd typed and deleted the same message over and over. I need to see you. Every version felt either too desperate or not enough. Finally, he put the phone away and muttered, "Coward." He walked back toward the hangar, his boots crunching against the gravel. The plane sat quiet under the rising sun, its metallic skin gleaming faintly. He placed a hand on the wing, grounding himself in the only thing that had ever made sense, flight. But this time, even the sky felt empty without her. Inside, he found the envelope she'd left on the workbench. He hadn't opened it before. The handwriting was small, careful. He tore it open. "Caleb," it read, "you taught me that even broken things can fly. But maybe what we both need now is to see if we can live, not just survive. I'll come back when I know who I am without anger." He sank onto the stool, the paper trembling in his hands. "Don't you get it?" he whispered to the empty room. "You're the only reason I remembered how to breathe." The silence that followed was unbearable. Hours passed before he made his choice. He went back to the plane, strapped in, and turned on the radio. His voice crackled over the small airfield frequency. "To anyone listening, this is Caleb Turner requesting clearance for departure." Static answered. Then, "Cleared for takeoff, Caleb. Safe skies." He smiled faintly, gripping the controls. "Let's find her." The engine roared. The hangar fell away beneath him, and the city opened wide below, bridges, rivers, the old roads she might have taken. As he flew along the coast, sunlight broke through the clouds, scattering gold over the ocean. His chest tightened at the sight. It was exactly where she'd gone. He could feel it. Down below, on the bluff where the memorial sat, Vivian looked up at the faint sound of an engine. Her heart stuttered. No, it couldn't be. But it was. The small two-seater banked gently, dipping low enough that she could see the gleam of its wings in the sunlight. Tears flooded her eyes. She stood, waving one arm over her head. Caleb. He saw her. Just a small figure near the edge of the cliff. But he knew. He circled once, then touched down on the narrow dirt strip nearby, the tires kicking up dust. The plane rolled to a stop, the propeller whirring down. Vivian was already running toward him. He jumped out before the engine stopped completely, the wind whipping his hair as he met her halfway. "Are you out of your mind?" she shouted through tears. "You could have crashed." He laughed breathlessly. "Would have been worth it." She shoved his shoulder, half furious, half relieved. "You can't just fly across counties looking for me like some movie scene." He grinned. "Guess I'm not great at waiting." Her anger melted as quickly as it came. "Why did you come?" "Because I finally realized something," he said. "I don't want to keep surviving the past. I want to build something that lasts. With you, if you'll let me." She stared at him, the ocean behind her blazing with sunlight. "You don't even know if I'm ready for that." "I don't care," he said. "I'll wait. I'll fly. I'll fight for it. But I'm done pretending I don't feel this." Vivian's lips trembled. "You're serious?" He stepped closer. "I haven't been this sure of anything in years." The wind blew her curls across her face, and he reached out instinctively to brush them back. The touch lingered. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she said softly, "You're still healing, Caleb." "So are you," he replied. "Maybe we can do it together." Her eyes filled again, this time not with sorrow, but with something gentler, braver. She nodded once. "Okay, but next time you come find me, try texting first." He laughed, the sound echoing against the cliffs. They stood there, framed by sea and sky, the wreckage of their old lives behind them, the horizon open and endless ahead. Caleb reached for her hand, fingers intertwining. "So, Vivian Harper," he said with quiet wonder, "what do you say? Ready to fly this jet?" She smiled through tears. "Only if you're the one beside me." He leaned in and kissed her, not desperate this time, but steady, certain. Above them, the ocean wind rose like applause, carrying the scent of salt and hope. The weeks that followed were quiet in the best possible way. Savannah bloomed again with sunlight and the smell of river salt drifting through open windows. Caleb and Vivian spent their mornings at the hangar, patching up the old two-seater, repainting it in deep navy with silver along the wings. Across the tail, in small, graceful letters, she painted one word, grace. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. One evening, as the last brushstroke dried, Caleb sat on the wing, watching her pack away the paint. "You ever think we'd end up here?" he asked. Vivian smiled faintly. "No. When I met you, I thought you were the most arrogant man I'd ever seen." He chuckled. "You weren't wrong. But I also saw someone drowning," she said quietly. "And I think part of me recognized it, because I was drowning too." Caleb turned toward her, the fading sunset casting gold across her skin. "And now, she said, "I think we're learning how to breathe again." They stayed like that for a long while, the hum of cicadas filling the space between words. Then Vivian spoke again, her tone lighter. "You know, you still owe me a flying lesson." He smirked. "I remember. And I'm cashing it in tonight." He blinked. "Tonight?" She nodded. "The stars are out. No excuses." Minutes later, they were rolling the plane out into the open. The sky stretched wide and black, glittering with 1,000 quiet lights. Caleb helped her climb into the cockpit, guiding her trembling hands over the controls. "Just like this," he said softly. "Don't fight the wind. Feel it. Trust it." Vivian's heartbeat thundered in her chest, but she nodded, her fingers steadying on the throttle. "Ready?" He smiled. "Then let's fly." The engine roared to life, the wheels bumping gently along the gravel strip before the plane lifted, weightless. Savannah's lights fell away beneath them until there was nothing but sky, moonlight, and breath. Vivian gasped as they climbed. "It's beautiful." Caleb looked at her. Not the stars, not the horizon, just her. "It always was. I just forgot how to see it." They soared higher, slicing through the air like a promise renewed. Below them, the river shimmered like liquid glass, and the dark forest stretched like velvet. The world was silent except for the heartbeat of the engine and the whisper of wind through metal. Vivian's hand drifted over his. "I think I get it now," she murmured. "Get what?" "What flying means to you. It's not about control, it's about surrender." Caleb's throat tightened. "You sound like a pilot already." She smiled. "Maybe I had the best teacher." As they descended, the runway lights flickered ahead like constellations waiting to be touched. When the plane landed, the world seemed softer somehow, the air lighter. They climbed out, and Vivian turned toward him, her curls tumbling in the night breeze. "You know what's funny?" she said. "I used to think people who talked about destiny were just romantic fools. Now I'm not so sure." Caleb tilted his head. "You think this was destiny?" "I think," she said, "we were two broken pieces that were always meant to find each other." He smiled, that quiet, unguarded kind that came from somewhere deeper than words. "Then I guess I'm grateful for every wrong turn that brought us here." She stepped closer, wrapping her arms around him. He held her, his chin resting on her hair, breathing her in. The air smelled like oil, salt, and something new, peace. After a long silence, she looked up at him and said softly, "You ever think about what you'll tell Jacob now?" Caleb's eyes flickered. "Yeah, I'll tell him his dad learned how to fly again, inside and out." "And what about me?" she teased gently. "Why do you tell people about the woman who painted your plane?" He brushed his thumb along her cheek. "I'll tell them she taught me that forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past. It's about choosing love anyway." Vivian's eyes shimmered. "That's a good lesson." He nodded. "It's the only one that matters." They kissed beneath the whine of crickets and the hum of cooling metal, the night folding around them like a secret kept by the stars. The next morning, the old hangar doors were open again, sunlight flooding through. The two of them stood side by side as the small crowd gathered. The neighborhood kids, old mechanics, local reporters. A charity air show was scheduled, the proceeds going to fund scholarships for underprivileged youth dreaming of flight school. Caleb gave the opening speech, voice steady, heart full. "Not too long ago," he began, "I forgot who I was. I let guilt clip my wings. But someone reminded me that the sky doesn't belong to those who are perfect. It belongs to those brave enough to try again." He looked toward Vivian, who was standing near the plane, her smile radiant. "This," he continued, "isn't just about flying. It's about grace, the kind you find when life gives you a second chance, and you decide to take it." The audience clapped. A few people wiped tears. Caleb turned back to the plane and reached for Vivian's hand. "Come on," he said. "Let's show them what freedom looks like." Together, they climbed in. The crowd watched as Grace roared down the runway, lifting smoothly into the clear blue sky. From below, it looked like the heavens themselves had opened to welcome them home. And as the plane rose higher, two hearts, once bound by pain, finally learned to fly not away from their past, but toward their future. When they landed, hand in hand, the applause was thunderous. But neither of them cared about the noise. They only cared about the quiet truth that lived between them. Love had not come to erase their scars, but to teach them how to live with them. That night, as they sat on the hangar roof watching the stars, Vivian said softly, "Funny how the sky used to feel so far away." Caleb nodded. "It's closer when you're not afraid to look up." Sometimes, the people who challenge us the most are the ones sent to heal us. Forgiveness doesn't always mean saying it's okay. It means deciding to stop carrying the weight that's been breaking your wings. If love or forgiveness came knocking on the door of your past, would you be brave enough to open it?
Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this one, then you'll absolutely love the next. It's even crazier and more captivating than you can imagine. So go ahead and click the video showing right here on your screen, and I'll see you in the next story.